Whether they intended it or not, it seems like they have had a considerable amount of success in convincing the average American that is the case. Because a recent Pew poll said that a significant number, I forgot exactly how much, like 25% of your Protestant, your conservative Protestant, about 25% of them believe that Jesus is not the only way to heaven. So it seems like whether the Baha'is intended it or not, they have succeeded in convincing the majority of Americans that there is more than one way to God. I want us to answer that question this morning. Is there only one way to God? Yes or no? Would you think for just a moment about Noah? The Lord said to Noah, enter into the ark, you and all your household, for you alone have I seen to be righteous before me in this time. And you shall take of every clean animal by sevens, a male and his female, and the animals that are not clean by twos, a male and his female, and the birds of the sky by twos, a male and female, to preserve offspring alive on all the face of the earth. For after 7 more days I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. And I will blot out from the face of the land every living thing that I have made. And Noah did according to all that the Lord had commanded him. Now Noah was 600 years old when the flood of the water came upon the earth. Then Noah and his 3 sons, and Noah's wife, and the wives of the 3 sons, entered into the ark because of the water of the flood. Of the clean beasts, the clean animals, and of the animals that are not clean, and of the birds, and of every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth, they entered into the ark to Noah, male and female, of all flesh, as God had commanded Noah. And it came back. After 7 days, the waters of the flood came upon the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, the fountains of the great deep burst open, and the floodgates of the sky were opened, and the rain fell upon the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. On the very same day, Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, and Noah's wife, and the wives of his 3 sons, entered into the ark. These and every beast after its kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth after its kind, and every bird of the sky after its kind, all sorts of birds. And so they entered into the ark to Noah, male and female, of all flesh. They that entered by twos after of all flesh entered as God had commanded Noah. And then the Lord closed it behind them. If you were to ask Noah, is there more than one way to God? What would Noah have said? If you would have asked Aunt Bertha, is there more than one way to God? What would she have answered? You know, God is an empty box to a lot of people. To our family and friends and our neighbors. God is just an empty designation. And they have filled that box with a creation of their own minds. A creation of their own imagination. And so God, for a lot of people, is a God after their own likeness and after their own image. They've created a God whom they like, that suits them. We are familiar with the argument for the existence of God called the cosmological argument. That argument says that for every effect, there has to have an adequate cause. And so you is like man. This was first proposed many years ago by Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas said that we learn something about God by studying man. It's an analogy. But now only those attributes of man that can be used to describe an infinite God can really be used to describe an infinite God. But God, when He created man, shares some of His attributes with us. And so we love, because God is love. And we communicate with our children because God communicates with His children. And so if you and I are trying to answer this question, is there more than one way to God? Then we ask ourselves, how has God communicated with us? Because love communicates. Love shares. And so how has God communicated? And we look the world over and we see a number of works that claim to be communication from God to man. The Upanishads, the Quran, the Bible, the Book of Mormon. Where has God communicated to man? And of course, we could study all of those, but to keep the lesson from being 3 hours long, we settle on studying the Bible. Turn to Exodus chapter 34, verses 6 and 7. How has God communicated to man? In the Bible, the first self-description of God is found in Exodus chapter 34, verses 6 and 7. Listen to how God describes Himself. The Lord passed by in front of Moses and proclaimed, the Lord God, compassionate and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in loving kindness and truth, who keeps loving kindness for thousands, who forgives iniquity and transgressions and sin. Yet He will by no means leave the guilty unpunished, visiting the iniquity of the fathers over the children and on the grandchildren of the third and fourth generation. This self-description of God comes on the heels of God, of the Israelites rather, making the golden calf and bowing down in front of the golden calf. And look what happens back in chapter 32. Look at verses 9 and 10. The Lord said to Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, they are an obstinate people. Now then, let me alone, that my anger may burn against them, and that I may destroy them, and I will make of you, Moses, a great nation. And on that day, God killed 3,000 Israelites. If you were to ask Aaron, is there more than one way to God? What would Aaron answer? Moses loves his people. And Moses goes to his people. Look down at verse 30 of chapter 32. The next day, after God implemented His justice on those 3,000 people and wiped them off the face of the earth, the next day Moses goes back to the Israelites. And he says, you yourselves have committed a great sin against God. Now I am going up to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin. Moses thinks that he could be a way to God. And so Moses goes to God with this suggestion. God, let me sacrifice myself for my people. Will it work? Is there more than one way to God? Verse 31, Moses returns to the Lord and says, alas, this people has committed a great sin, and they made a god of gold for themselves. But now if you will forgive their sin, and the emotions are obvious because he interrupts himself. And he says, but if not, please blot out from me from your book which you have written. God, allow me to sacrifice myself for my people. But what does God say? How does God respond? No. God says, whoever, verse 33, has sinned against me, I will blot him out of my book. Moses could not be a sacrifice for God because Moses himself needed a sacrifice before God. Moses could not be a sacrifice on behalf of his people because he himself had sinned. verse 2, he says, I will send an angel before you. In other words, God says, you are so sinful, I can't even be in your presence. He says, I will not go up with you, because if I do, at the end of verse 3, he says, I will not destroy you on the way. Man needs somebody to go between us and God. There are not various avenues to God. There's only one. And man needs help to stay away from golden calves. The way of man is not in himself. It is not a man who walks to direct his own self. Jeremiah 10 and verse 23. So we've got to have a mediator. Before Moses leaves Mount Sinai, verses 13 and 14 in chapter 33, Moses says to God, if you don't go with us, don't send us away from here. Don't let us continue this journey without you being present. Is there more than one way to God? If the Baha'is are right, if all religious roads lead to the same destination, then you have got to, number one, deny that objective truth exists. You have got to redefine truth. Truth is whatever you make it to be. If I want to say Eric's shirt there is yellow, that's fine. My truth is different from your truth. Is that real? Second of all, in order for the Baha'is to be right, you have got to also redefine every major religion. Is the Quran right when they say, kill the infidel, kill the unbelievers, kill the Jews and the Christians? The Quran teaches that. We studied it here. Just last month, the supreme religious commander in Iran, Ali Khamenei, quoted from the Quran in front of the Revolutionary Guard in Iran, calling for the extermination of infidels. Is that right? Or is the New Testament right when it says, pray for your enemies? Bless them who use you and persecute you. If the Baha'is are right, and Revelation is just a progression in God revealing himself, the Quran is newer than the New Testament. Which means we should follow it instead of the New Testament. Which is right, the Old Testament that teaches physical circumcision, or the New Testament which teaches spiritual circumcision? You see the problem you get into when you try to say there's more than one way to God. You end up contradicting yourself. The Bible, of course, teaches that there is only one way to God. Turn to Romans chapter 3, verses 21 through 26. You see, the fundamental problem we have today in 21st century America is the same fundamental problem that man has always had, and that is, how do we come to the presence of God? God is holy. We are sinful. How do we resolve that tension? God told the Israelites, I can't go among you, you're too sinful. How do we come to the presence of God? Look at Paul's words in Romans chapter 3, beginning in verse 21. But now, apart from the righteousness of God, the law, the righteousness of God has been manifested, being witnessed by the law and the prophets. Even the righteousness of God through faith in Jesus Christ for all those who believe.